Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with Rabbi Coffman. Today's topic is the Talmud and oral law satanic. Why are there so much disgusting allowances hidden within the Talmud and all these laws? Man, I could just go on and on and on, and it's just like there is really no end to it. And the irony of it is, we have dabbled in this before. I've been getting a lot of more frequent questions, and I'm having the ability lately to do a lot of referrals, like here, go watch this video, click this time marker, and things like that. But I think I just want to get this out here again, just because I think it's a good time for it. As I mentioned to you before, I've never heard you never hear a Jewish person with any of these claims. You only hear people who don't know the oral law, or they've been taught by Christians on how the Jews are wicked and how the oral law is so wicked and things like that. And I searched about 4 or 5 of these things out myself earlier when I first here's the thing, while I was a Messianic, right? I was kind of on leaving out the back door of Messianic faith, and I think people noticed it, and they were like, "Oh, they noticed I was wearing my tzitzit were all white, and they used to have the thread of blue in there, not the color, just blue." And then they noticed it like the moment that I took it out and swapped them out for all white tzitziot, they started approaching me saying, "Is everything okay, man?" And then they started talking to me about the oral law. Yeah, really going off on the oral law, and they said, "Well, man, you can't really trust that. Did you know?" I mean, Messianics are saying this. People who are supposed to be, closer to, I would have thought, closer to being Jewish than the Christian would be, and they're sitting here trying to tell me all these horror stories as to why you should not follow the rabbinical authority on things, and so I went to go research this stuff out myself. I had like 3 major claims, and I was like, at the time, I was like, really? Oh my gosh! I mean, I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and I went to a trustworthy friend. My friend Lon Cherry Holmes, who's been studying it out quite intensively. And I said, "Is it true, man?" I said, "Is it true, X, Y, Z, or, X, Y, and Z, if you want to call it that?" And he's like, and he laughed. He goes, "Are you kidding me?" And I'm like, "No, I'm serious, man." And so he would explain these things to me. I was thinking, are you kidding me? That is the most, now it made me angry towards these Messianics, because it's like they just are looking like magnets, like a dry sponge, looking for anything that they can absorb to shed any kind of doubt on Judaism, on rabbinical Judaism, whatever, and on the oral law. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So with that said, Shalom, Rabbi Coffman. How are you today?
Doing just great. We did actually dabble in this, a little bit. One thing, you have to keep in mind before we start going through the sources, certainly everything is context, right? Let's repeat that. Everything is context.
Everything
if
is
you
context.
don't look at the context, then of course it looks like, these statements are 100%, outrageous. And even in context, people will say, "Oh, that's just apologetics. That's this, that's that." But it does actually make a lot of sense, as, hopefully, we'll go through and we'll show where the mistakes are.
Very good, very good. Okay, so the phone lines are open. Only one rule is we need to keep it specifically geared towards the topic of today's show. You can bring up any topic you've got regarding the oral law, things that you have seen that negative light has been cast upon it, and so that the rabbi can clarify it, or we can take some notes and discuss it on the next episode or something like that. So number will be on your screen in just a moment. I had to actually fully log in, and now that it's there, we'll put that number up. So call in with your questions. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of kick this thing off and let you take it away, Rabbi. So which one do we want to start with? I sent you a list, but there were so many things on there, and they were all really good. Which one do you want to start with today?
Let's start with the most controversial first.
Okay.
And that is these negative, nasty statements. I mean, yeah, we do have plenty of nasty statements against non-Jews, but let's take the non-Jew, Mr. JC himself. Let's see what the Talmud says.
Wait. Did you just call JC a non-Jew? Really?
Huh?
You may have to clarify
Oh,
that.
that was a faux pas. I was hoping no one was going to catch that.
Right on. Okay, go ahead.
No, no, actually he was no, he actually was a Jew. That's true. One thing to keep in mind, is I always tell people, say, well, all these things that that JC did or supposedly did. Well, we have 39 tractates, Talmud and Midrashim and all these other sources that if he did everything as great as he said or they said about him, there'd be many, many, many sources
Great
that would speak
meaning
that
miracles and raising people from
right.
the dead and healing the
There'd be
blind.
hundreds of references.
Right, right.
There's only a handful, a handful of references, and they're pretty much all bad. They're all negative.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons, that actually we have some of these statements is because the Talmud was once censored. So when the Talmud was censored, before it was finally passed down, so there are references to him without actually naming him by name. So one thing I mentioned to you earlier, that when the Talmud calls someone a heretic, right? That a heretic is called a min, right? Mem yud nun is that's what normally we translate as a heretic, and the word min is an acronym. It means meyeshu hanoitzri, means from JC the Christian. Now, why didn't they put that in there? Because if it's a negative statement against him, which most likely it is, then the non-Jews reading this are going to say, "Hey, take that out," right? So they didn't know the difference what this word was.
Ah, right. So it was code.
So they were able to put things in there, but there were places where like for instance that he actually got killed in the Sanhedrin, the high court actually killed him, right? That's in Tractate Sanhedrin, and in many older versions of the Talmud, it's not there. There's like it's sort of like a gap, between one page and the other, and this part there's like 5 or 6 lines there that are totally missing. So many years ago, someone came out with whatever the small pamphlet that was called Chisronos Hashas, which means things that were missing in the Talmud that we have that they just got censored out. Well, this was one of them, because obviously if you say we killed them, then it's gonna kind of make us look bad.
Right.
So, they censored that. They definitely censored that out. But in any case, there are a number of statements about him. One of them, there are a few different sources. One of them is in Sanhedrin 107 7b, where it says that he was actually sexually immoral. So the Talmud in a few places here and elsewhere tells the following story that that he was with his Rebbe, Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia. Rabbi Yeshua ben, now the whole discussion if really Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia was his main rabbi or not. Whatever, we're not going to get into that. But the point is that Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia is known that he would teach, if someone didn't understand something clearly, he would teach it over to him 400 times. Right? That is a well-known thing. Anyone who knows Talmud knows anything about some of the rabbis. Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia has a tremendous amount of patience, with people. In this case, he's with this guy. I mean, with Mr. JC they went to an inn. They went to stay in an inn, and Rabbi Shua ben Prachia made a comment about how nice of a place it was. Well, comes along JC and he says, "Oh, Rebbe, it looks like you have the huts for this, for the innkeeper's wife." In other words, he just said what a nice place it was, and he insinuated, he's looking at the innkeeper's wife. We'll keep this PG-13 in the biblical sense, right? His thoughts are going, crazy, etc. And obviously, Rabbi Shua ben Prachi gets extremely upset. Obviously, being accused by a student of, impropriety over here. So what does he do? He throws him out. Right? He throws him out, tells him, he gets rid of him, and he comes back. To apologize, to do tshuva, right? And Rabbi Shua ben Prachi throws him out again, right? He comes back a second time, throws him out. Third time he comes back, Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachi is ready to accept his repentance, but he was right in the middle of saying the Shema, so he couldn't answer. So when he couldn't answer, he took that as another sign that he's just going to throw him out anyway, and he went off and did what he did. So one thing, there are a few things that we learn over here. One thing is that by Rabbi Shua ben Prachi, he's taken the task by, you should push away. I forget how it goes. Push away with the left, draw close with the right, or vice versa. I think the right hand is stronger.
Yeah.
Right? You push away with the right, you draw closer with the left, which he didn't do. He pushed him out totally, and then he went and did, or what his, disciples say he did, etc. But the point is that he made a very rude, disgusting comment, about his Rebbe in public, and basically embarrassed him. Right? It's probably one of the worst things a person can do is, go embarrass. Yeah, go try this at home. Embarrass your Rebbe with sexual immorality. So, so someone made the claim, how can it be that, according to this, he's sexually immoral? He's a pig, my language, right? That's being a pig, right? You're going to say that about, someone who's like, an angel of God? You're going to say, Rebbe, oh, look, I see you got the huts for this woman. Like, what are you, a pervert? Like, come on. And so the point is that, yeah, he had a problem. Right? He had a problem. Rabbi Shimon Brachas, threw him out. He was ready to accept him. He was ready to accept him coming back. It's just he was saying the Shema. So he got taken to task for, not taking his repentance, more seriously. But the bottom line is he made a lewd comment. He made a lewd comment insinuating what he never should have said. There was another case also about his so-called mother, or not mother, but about Mary Magdalena, as the Torah calls her, Mary Magdalene, right? The Talmud in Shabbos 104b, right, says that basically she was how are we going to say this? She wasn't so moral, let's just say. She was, she was out there having fun, and so the Talmud says, talks about some of her escapades and says that, she's basically a prostitute. Hung out with a lot of different people. That didn't bother her. They, oh, look, what a terrible statement, against her. When the Talmud makes a statement, and says, this person's a thief, or if somebody, like, give an example, someone steals wheat. They steal wheat, they grind it up, they make it into flour, turn it into bread. Person makes a blessing on it. Talmud says it's not a blessing. That's called being disgusting in God's eyes, right? You're called being disgusting. They say, but what do you mean? I took this, I made it, I made a blessing on it. What's the problem? The Talmud has no problem calling out people for bad things that are done, for lewd statements, for false statements. The Talmud's all about getting to the truth of the matter, right? And and if someone says something, they say, how could you said that? You said something somewhere else, right? There's a contradiction. So then the Talmud tries to answer up, the contradiction. The commentaries go to town on what the contradiction's about, what they're speaking about, this, that, right? So when there are a lot of places where the Talmud brings out about character trait, right? And in the character traits themselves, either they're going to be exemplary or not. There's really, you're not going to really see sometimes where you're going to say, no, he's really in the middle. Not so bad, not so good, but, there are cases like that, but usually it's black and white. It's usually, this is good, and it can lead to this, this, and this, or this is bad. So, is it just a knock? It's not a knock on all non-Jews. This is very specific. This woman had a problem, right? She had a very serious moral problem, right? So the Talmud tells stories about her because of her lineage and who she is. We're not singling out over here, people just for the sake of, they're not Jewish, they're Jewish, whatever the case is, just to single them out and say, oh, we're gonna nail them to the cross. Get it? We're gonna nail them in order to show how bad they are. We're just gonna turn their life upside down and say how cruel and how bad, etc. And that the Talmud's coming to say that, oh, you want to think this lineage is so good, think again. Now, another reference to JC is getting page 57a, where there are different people. Now, this is interesting, where different people are brought up, their souls are brought up, and they're asked different questions. I mean, that's really the main question. Is it good to be attached to the Jewish people or not? Right? That was really the question. They asked JC, they asked a few other people, and they said, by the way, he said it's a good thing, or etc. So they said, okay, he said these terrible things, etc. They said, so what are you doing? What's your punishment, in the next world? Right? So the Talmud says his punishment is that, every day for eternity, he's lying in dung. Well, I guess manure would be kind of nice, but I think this probably pretty much, stinks to high heaven here. And he's smelling up the place. So you can learn it very simply. His actions were so bad, right, that, no one ever gets punishment. Keep in mind, we may never understand 100%, how things work, etc. But punishment is metered out measure for measure. So over there, why does it say he's so bad that he's lying in dung for eternity? Because, as one of the later commentaries points out, he was distinguished and he did more disgusting things than other people. In other words, I guess, as this commentary points out, there's a hierarchy of how bad you can be.
Right.
So if he had these disgusting character traits, right, of calling out his Rebbe for being a womanizer, right? He calls him up for being a womanizer, so to speak, in the inn, right? So he has kind of disgusting character trait, right?
Right.
So therefore, if he's being lewd, and crude at the same time, what do you think the punishment? What do you think the punishment may be? For somebody of that ilk. So therefore, this commentary points out he is distinguished. He is distinguished in the sense that he is worse than other people.
Okay.
And therefore, the punishment is much more severe. So there's actually another place, same thing, in Sota 47a, where it says JC is wicked. Right? So the same story with Rabbi Shua ben Prachi in the inn. Instead of saying, yeah.
I want to cover, because obviously we only have 1 hour per show.
Right.
So on the same topic, I want to move away from Yashke Jesus and run into how the Talmud talks about the non-Jew. Yeah, just a person like me, someone who's not a convert, B'nai Noach, or righteous Gentile, however you want to call it.
Nobody knows what you are, except that you're a redneck. That's all we know. We don't know anything else.
I'm the righteous redneck. Okay, so
right. That's it. You have to get that patented. The righteous redneck. If I wasn't sitting here not drinking caffeine, that is the thing that's going to sell. You better patent that now. Anyone else who doesn't, you're going to jail.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's too funny. So the claim is, let me see if I can pull it back up. The screen is really bright.
Why is a non-Jew called an animal?
Yeah, I mean, why does it says?
That's a good one.
Is that the one? Let's see.
No, that is one. Why is the question is, why is a non-Jew not called Adam? The word Adam means a human.
Okay.
Right? So the terminology, normally you'd say, well, if he's not a human, what is he? Then he's a cretin. He's below a human. He's an animal, right? That would be the logical.
Let me add to that. Okay. There's a quote here. Now, granted, it may not be accurate, but it is a quote. In Sanhedrin 74b, it says sexual intercourse between the goyim, between the nations, is like intercourse between animals. So, in so many different ways, it says that the Talmud refers to the nations of the world. If you're not Jewish, you're just I won't say disgusting, but I will say like an animal.
Let's take it even better. That the Talmud in Avodah Zarah 22a to 22b says all non-Jews are suspect of bestiality.
Which is
That's
kind
pretty
of what
bad.
this, right? Yeah, which is kind of like what this is saying here too. So, okay, go
Right,
ahead.
exactly, right.
So, what's going on here?
So in the first case,
Keep it short
right,
because we're going to cover
I'm
a
gonna
lot
try
of
to keep it
topics.
short. Let me
Okay,
go here.
stay on point. And
I got
if
it.
you hear me cough or clear my throat, it's me saying
Yeah,
let's tighten. I'm just kidding. I'm
I
not going to
got it.
interrupt you.
I got it.
I'm
All right.
messing with
So
yeah.
a non-Jew's
Okay.
not called human or not called Adam. It says the text itself says the Jews are called Adam and the Gentiles are not. Now, how do you translate the word Adam? You would normally say the word Adam means no, Adam means man, right? So the people claim, it says the Gentiles are non-Jews. They're not saying that. Well, they say they're not men, right? So people are going to claim that it supports considering non-Jews to be beasts. They're basing it on a literal translation. In other words, if you say, that they're not called men, then obviously you're calling them animals. So the literal translation is incorrect because what does the context say? It says when referring to a human versus an animal, what's the terminology used? B'nai Adam. What's the word B'nai Adam? Literally means the son of Adam. Sons, literally. Sons of Adam. Who's it referring to over there? Adam and Eve. Right? So when it says, in this situation, Adam is representing a Jew. It doesn't mean that he's a man and you're not a man. It's referring to the sons of Adam and Eve who are Jews collectively as one single entity. So what it's saying over there is the people of Israel, i.e. the Jewish people, right? The ritual is for them. Non-Jews have to keep whatever they have to keep. That's true, but it's not for Gentiles. So therefore, when it says the sons of man, it's talking about literally the children of Adam and Eve. Right? Okay, whether they're Jews or not Jews doesn't matter, but it's talking about, in general, the Jewish people. If it's talking in general about the Jewish people, we're just saying they're Jews and these are non-Jews. We're not saying they're not human. We're just saying that they're not Jews, right? Which gets to the other question, right? Which we asked. Let me just see that here. About non-Jews. All non-Jews being suspect on bestiality, saying that basically they're no different than animals. Then it was common to stable animals with idolaters, and it was common for them to be involved in bestiality, part of ritual, different rituals, etc. Now there is a minority opinion over there that says, the statement isn't true, that we don't hold of it, or that it was limited to a specific time and place.
Right.
In other words, in a specific time and place, non-Jews, even the fish didn't move when they walked in, right? But that's only for that time and place, not forever. Not saying every single animal, that walks by a non-Jew. Well, guess what?
Right.
It
Right.
depends. It depends on the circumstances. Others say that it was so widespread that they were suspect of animals everywhere. Now, you might say, well, that's not common today. Okay. I mean, it is. I mean, it does happen, right? We're not going to say every non-Jew is suspect of it.
Right.
It could be for a specific time and place.
But that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
it does. It makes perfect sense because, I mean, there's so many things that we know even today, like in other cultures, where they do things that Americans would look at as absolutely disgusting. And let's say, for example, the history books here said, oh, the Mayans or whatever, they go through these human sacrifices, blah, blah, blah. Let's say 100 years from now, the same culture stopped doing that, right? And then they get a hold of our literature and say, why are they calling us disgusting beasts? We don't do that kind of thing. Right, so it would make sense to have a possible situation where there's a time slot here where this was more applicable or completely applicable, maybe not any longer, depending on the culture.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's definitely one thing. Obviously, the other thing is in context, right? Exactly in context of what is being said. Also, it speaks about, by non-Jews. It says that they would often commit adultery if they couldn't find his wife. His wife wasn't around. They would take an animal, right? They would take even a Jew's animal and sodomize it, right? So he'd ask the question, what do you mean? Every non-Jew can't be with his wife. He's going to find a Jew's animal, and be with it. So that there's a whole, the whole much deeper, much deeper thing of this, that stems from the impurity of the snake, and it's removed from the Jewish people, and the Torah is given at Mount Sinai, etc. So, the non-Jew, has a heightened level of lust that a Jew doesn't, right? Because he doesn't have the same Torah that a Jew has. So he's so overcome with lust, he can even desire animals. Now you might say, well, that's an unnatural desire. Now that could be. But at the same time, in the book of Leviticus chapter 18, what does the Torah say clear? It says you're not allowed to be with an animal, right? A Jew is not allowed to be with an animal, right? You're not allowed to, you're not allowed to be a homosexual, right? The same, verse right before. So if it wasn't, something that was common, even if it's not natural, it doesn't matter. The Torah put it in and said, I don't want you to do this because of the negative repercussions. But it must have been out there that people were doing it, even Jew or non-Jew. Right. So, so there's this whole discussion. I mean, it gets a much, which we don't have time for, but it gets into a much deeper discussion, exactly what's going on here, because rationally, of course, you're going to take your pots and pans and anything else you can find and throw it at your screen. You're going to say, you stupid racist. What are you doing? Speaking against, why are you saying that this non-Jew is going to prefer an animal to his wife? That sounds pretty bad.
Right.
Right. But if you understand what the lust, was given in the body, and if you don't have a Torah to overcome it, right? The Torah says that, the Talmud says that a person has, a person's given an evil inclination, and the only way to fight the evil inclination is through Torah. Well, non-Jew doesn't have that same level. If you don't have that same level, how do they fight that evil inclination, especially when it comes to lust?
Right. Okay.
Right? So that could be so strong. Just one second. That could be so strong. They may just say, it doesn't matter who I'm with. Is my wife an animal? Jew's animal? Who cares? It's all the same, because they have this lust that they have to get out, and they have to get it out in some way.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Staying along the same lines, I'm going to read one off of Sanhedrin 58b. If a goy or Gentile hits a Jew, he must be killed. Now, moving further, if a Jew murders a Gentile, there will be no death penalty. Sanhedrin 57a.
Right. Right. So, so there's a verse in the. So where do we learn that out from? The Talmud says we learn that out from Moshe Rabbeinu killing the Egyptian, right? When he looks back and forth, doesn't see anybody around him, right? He kills him. That's Exodus chapter 2, verse 12. Now, if he does such a thing, right, he's liable. Why? If a non-Jew, hits a Jew, why does he get killed? Well, obviously, it's one of the 7 no-hide laws. Murder is something, and let's keep in mind, a non-Jew has to keep all the laws that make rational sense. You're not allowed to murder. Everyone agreed that was bad, right? It's on the book, secular law. It's a bad thing. So he's liable because he doesn't hold by the 7 Noahide laws. Now, a lot of things that if a non-Jew, if a Jew, a Jew's animal gores a non-Jew's animal, he's exempt from pain. A non-Jew has to pay if his animal, if he causes damage, right? Why? So the main reason, there's a common thread. The main reason is because they didn't keep the Noahide laws. If they didn't keep the Noahide laws, then the Sanhedrin, the high court, has the right to uproot a non-Jew's money because they didn't do what the Torah told them they have to do. Right? So if they don't do what they're supposed to do, then their money is what they call hefker. It's ownerless. So therefore, they cause someone damage. Yeah, they're going to have to pay. A non-Jew does something to them, they'd be exempt. It doesn't mean it's 100% permissible. They may be exempt from pain, right? But why are they exempt? Not because we hate non-Jews, right? Even rednecks in Kingsland, right? But not because we hate non-Jews. The reason is very simple, because they didn't uphold what they're supposed to keep. Now you might say, well, they were never taught it. It doesn't matter. Things that make logical sense.
Okay, help us make
that they didn't uphold.
Help us make logical sense of that exact example. Let's say, for example, someone who is from Mexico or Cuba who is here illegally, right? They're not following the United States laws, this and that. They're driving. I get in a car accident with them and I smack their vehicle. Neither one of us have insurance. The judge says, you know what, William, he has to pay you since he's not supposed to be here. That's I'm just throwing that up there because I don't think that's legit or accurate. But I want you to use something like that. Use something like that so we can all wrap our heads around this particular one, if you can.
No, so an example. So an example is two people in a car accident, right? A non-Jew smashes into a
No. Don't use that. You use something like an illegal foreigner in the United States and someone who is supposed to be here. A law-abiding citizen versus one who's not law-abiding.
We'll use in Israel. There are people from Sudan and Eritrea that have come here illegally. There's the whole thing to try and get them out of the country, right, causing all kinds of problems here. So somebody like that, right, they're not supposed to be here.
Okay.
Right, they're definitely not supposed to be here. They cause damage to someone else, they're going to pay through the nose.
Okay.
Right, they're 100% going to pay through the nose, even if they're not supposed to be here.
Right.
Right. If someone damaged them, they say, well, that's your problem for being here. You weren't supposed to be here in the first place. Right? You're here illegally. Right? If you're here illegally not doing what you're supposed to do, then your possessions don't really belong to you. Doesn't necessarily mean I have a right to go and beat you up and take your stuff. But at the same time, you don't deserve to be here. Right? So therefore it's like you're forfeiting what you own, because you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation.
Gotcha. That makes more sense because I'm actually thinking of a car accident I was in a while back where I was actually hit. I was actually T-boned by a driver who was actually in an illegal lane. The insurance company did not give to me what I was due because when I came in, I was violating another law and said, well, if you had been obeying the law, then you would have been given all these privileges.
Why,
but since
you weren't in the right lane?
No, I was actually I was in a turn lane, turning across traffic in an area. All the traffic was stopped except for this one moving vehicle. And anyway, I was in a center turn lane, but I was trying to turn out of that turn lane where there were no turn lane marks to do so. And they said because of that one technicality, I didn't get anything from that at all. I wound up having to. It was horrible, and so it does have to do with one of us was, whatever. One's not following the law, one is. End of the day, it's really important to be following the laws if you want to have favor in a decision. So using that
again, these laws have to make rational sense.
Okay.
I mean, not necessarily all traffic laws 100% make rational sense. Certain things.
Yeah.
But in general, a non-Jew is going to be liable for anything that makes rational sense, even though there are, plenty of things we wouldn't, why that is. So, that we have to keep, that we certainly have to keep in mind, all this, but, that's what I would say.
All right. If a Jew finds an object lost by a Gentile, it does not have to be returned. Now, anytime I read this off this page, this is obviously written from a Christian perspective or Messianic. If it's misquoted, please quote it. Tell us how it's supposed to be quoted.
No, I looked it up.
Okay.
I looked it up over there, but see it 24a. Again, what's the reason?
Okay.
They don't keep the 7 They don't keep the 7 Noahide laws.
Okay.
So therefore, their money, their possessions are ownerless. So even if it's got their name on it, I can take it. Right now, there's a caveat over there. And that is, it's still better to return it, right? It's still better to return it. I don't have an obligation to, right? I don't have an obligation to, but there's something called being straight. For example, if a person's in the store and you pay for something and the cashier, gives you more change back than you paid for, then you should be getting back. You're allowed to keep it. Right? It's their mistake. You're allowed to keep it. At the same time, you count the change and you realize there's a mistake. You don't say, oh, it's not you. I can just keep it and walk away. Right? So therefore, it's still better to be straight and to be honest, and give the money back. There have been, numerous cases over the years where they wanted to test the person, see how honest they were. If they gave them more money back, would they give it, when they give it back, and actually later on in life, it actually saved them, for being, for being totally honest. So again, there's this common, there's a common theme, and it doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter if someone says, well, had I been there and I was there my great 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 grandparents' time, I would have kept the laws properly. It doesn't matter. There's a general rule that they never upheld what they were supposed to do. Therefore, their money is considered ownerless. Again, doesn't mean you can just steal from them, right? And so it doesn't mean that, but at the same time, it's like they're forfeiting something they lose. It's like they gave it up.
Okay.
Now, again, if a person would get caught and they didn't return it, they say, well, I have a right to keep it. Okay, that's bad. That's the creation of God's name. So, a person has to be smart also. You can't transgress the 615th commandment about don't be a moron, right? You have to, you have to think also, what the possible ramifications of such a thing could be.
So the quote here from Sanhedrin 57a is a misquote then. It says, what a Jew steals from a Gentile, he may keep.
Yeah, there are two opinions. There are two opinions in Shulchan Aruch whether if he steals, he's allowed to keep it or not. Right? One opinion is he's allowed to keep it. Another opinion is he's not allowed to keep it. And we hold according to the second opinion, where he shouldn't be, where he's not allowed to keep it. Again, even if we hold according to the first opinion, why should he be allowed to keep it? Again, it's the same. It comes back to the same premise.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you don't do what you're supposed to do, then you don't own anything.
Mm-hmm.
It might sound harsh. It might sound cruel. It might not sound fair. But remember, either, we'll make this statement many times. Either the Torah is true or it's not true. You uphold it or you don't uphold it. And if you don't uphold it, there are repercussions, whether you're a Jew or a non-Jew. And, nobody wants to hear that. In a non-Jew, these laws are absolutely universal. Well, most of them. There are certain things that we wouldn't necessarily have thought of, but the vast majority are things that are outright, they're outright obvious. And if a non-Jew doesn't uphold those universal laws, what happens to the world? The world gets destroyed. You can't live in such a place, right? It'd be impossible to live. So therefore, since they don't uphold their end of the bargain, in many of these cases, it comes down to the same thing. They didn't do what they're supposed to do. You say, but that's not fair. It sounds racist. Yeah, it sounds racist if you don't understand what's going on, right? If you don't understand the context. If they don't uphold their end of the bargain, they are liable. That's it. It's what, and why they're liable in most cases for the death penalty. For exactly that reason, because these things are universal. These things are so obvious. Don't kill, don't steal, don't murder. These things are pretty obvious that everybody knows. Right, you ask a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, are you allowed to steal? It depends where side of the tracks it came from, but they'll tell you probably, no, you're not allowed to.
Right.
Right? Most people know what is permitted and what's not. Okay, there are different levels, different boundaries, this, that, but everybody knows basic things. And if you don't uphold that, you're living in a totally lawless world, which, even though we do have, laws on the books, the world still looks pretty bad. With people trying to cheat and steal and all that. But, at the end of the day, a lot of these things, even if we say on the books, what the Talmud says is permissible. Let's say for argument's sake, that is the law. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to do it.
It's not advised to do so. It's just,
it doesn't, just because
extreme.
I'm allowed to doesn't mean,
right.
It doesn't mean by any stretch that I should, and there are things that don't necessarily apply to a non-Jew. Let's say by the laws of speaking lashon hara, speaking badly against others, a non-Jew can do it, right? They don't have the same laws in speaking badly against others. But I would say, and again, this is me, you can take me to task for it, it's not a good thing to get in the habit of, even though everybody does it.
Right.
Is it one of the 7 Noahide laws? No. Is it good for your soul if you want to reach potential? You want to be someone who's pure and upright and is trying to reach, higher spiritual potential? You stay away from that like the plague.
Right.
Even if it's permissible. I mean, technically speaking, we can speak about anybody. Jews can speak about non-Jews, right? That's technically, it's not lashon hara. The Chofetz Chaim over there says it's still not a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's permissible, because it just brings up bad character traits. Mm-hmm. And if you want to try and fight these bad character traits, you want to stay away from speaking badly against other Jews. Don't speak against non-Jews either.
Right.
Because if you do, that's just going to open up a Pandora's box. And once it opens up a Pandora's box, it's game over. It's not, it's just something that's so much the way of the world. No one's ever going to learn from it. No one's ever going to stop doing it. It's hard enough. It's hard enough to try and stop yourself doing it. But if you're used to doing it and this is permissible, then there's no way to fix it.
Right.
It becomes almost impossible to fix it.
I can almost see a connection, even with my memories growing up as a kid. We lived in some areas that had really, really bad sides of town. You didn't go over there at all. I mean, not during the daytime, during the nighttime at all. You just stayed clear of it, right? And there's probably people over there that were actually good, but the majority reputation of it was these people are scumbags. They're scum of the earth. In fact, I'm sure everyone listening right now has heard that term regarding a person or a people group, that they're the scum of the earth, right? It's no different here. I mean, they get their reputation because of things that they were actually doing. Now, granted, they may not be doing it now, which like Rabbi said, could be very time-related material. If all the sages were here now and they were rewriting it with today's culture, they would probably read completely differently now. So it's really contextual based as well. So I can see how that would be. I mean, because there's areas that
I don't know. I'm not sure how much that necessarily would change. In that sense. At the same time,
because it has happened,
it is,
right?
It is the law is, the law is what it is. The only question is, are you allowed, to benefit from this, or not? Now, if you live in a non-Jewish society, obviously, the best thing is, not to, right?
Right.
Very simply because you got other people watching, because of fear. Right, because of what what people could say or whatever, it could put yourself and put the Jewish people in a dangerous situation.
True.
So technically speaking, even if it is permissible, doesn't necessarily mean
it's advised.
Doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it. I mean, there are other statements, also that I just see here. One second. That Avodah Zarah 36b discusses that there's a decree made over non-Jewish girls that they have the status of neither what we'll call spiritual cooties, right, when they are born. So what are you going to say, like a newborn baby is licentious, like when they're born, right? That sounds kind of negative. So there it discusses, right, what's the point of making that statement and giving them that status to show 100% that a Jew should stay away from a non-Jew.
Right.
They have spiritual cooties, whatever it is. It's going that.
I get that.
That should help stop intermarriage, right? Intermarriage.
Totally. Right.
Now, does that mean there's anything wrong with them when they're born? I mean, you got to be crazy to make such a statement.
Right.
That doesn't make any logical sense.
It's context. Okay.
Yeah, it's context.
Okay, so this will be the last one on the goyim before we move forward. We got about 15 minutes left, so I want to move on to a different area. But before we do, let's cover this last one. Sopharim 15, even the best of the Gentiles, the goyim, should be killed. Should all be killed. Is that a misquote, or is there something? Or is it a context thing again?
Where's that brought down?
It says Sopharim 15.
That could be. It's I didn't see it.
Well, we can come back to that later. That's fine.
I didn't see it inside, but
okay.
I mean, let's break down. Let's break down between a Jew and a non-Jew.
Okay.
The only difference between a Jew and a non-Jew is the fact that Jews given the Torah. If the Jew's given the Torah, that means he has extra obligations. It should turn him into a mensch. It should make him honest, right? They should see the difference between, Jews and non-Jews, how they act. Now, obviously, not everyone acts that way, and there are plenty of Jews that make a desecration of God's name. We're not even going to go into that. But if a Jew doesn't uphold what the Torah says, in many ways, he's no different than a non-Jew. Now, if you look at it in that context, a non-Jew he never heard anything about the Noahide laws. Right?
Right.
If a non-Jew never heard anything about the Noahide laws, how often are they going to do things that probably, transgress the Torah and do all kinds of other things?
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're not going to say they're all murderers and they're all butchers. Yeah, I mean, you have plenty, you have enough good people out there. We're not saying, across the board. What we are saying is if you're not attached to Torah, a Jew or a non-Jew, what distinguishes them from an animal? Now, I'll tell you the following quick story. That when I was first engaged, I was first married, and I used to go. I was back in Boston, famous Boston Marathon. So we used to stay by somebody's house. It was like the 16th, 17th mile mark. They called it Heartbreak Hill. It was like the last hill before going down to finish the race. And one of the comments that my wife made was over here. I mean, I had a lot of my family there and, friends of my family there. And she said, you can't tell the Jews from the non-Jews by the way they dress, by the way they talk, by the way they act. If a Jew doesn't have the Torah and he doesn't hold by what the Torah says, he's no different than a non-Jew. How can we expect, I mean, this is not a racist statement, so people should not take it that way. How can we expect a non-Jew, if they don't have any guidelines, to be honest and do what they're supposed to do on a regular basis? Now, there will be some that will be, just because they believe in it and this is right or whatever. But if you don't have a guideline, if you don't have an anchor that's going to tell you what's right and wrong, then what's right, then euthanasia is a mitzvah. You're just putting someone out of their misery, and you're doing something that's great because you're stopping them from suffering, right? It's not about knowledge, it's not about racism. It's about being connected to Torah. And if a Jew is not connected to Torah, he's no different than a non-Jew. So even if you say, the best should be killed, what does that mean? If they're not holding according to Torah, what are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what? I'm not saying everybody, right? I'm not saying everybody is bad, right? But in the context of that, in the real world that we live in, imagine if there were not sports on the weekends, what people would be doing. They'd be killing each other. At least sports, on TV or in the stadiums, at least they're satisfying 50,000, 100,000 people, keeping them at bay. If you didn't have that, they'd be doing worse things, right? And again, because they're not attached, they're just attached to the culture. They're attached to the street. So if you're attached to the street, what's it going to bring? We know what the street brings. It's a disaster, and it's no different for a Jew if they're not attached to Torah. All the more so, if a non-Jew's not attached to Torah and he has no anchor, then how's he gonna have that balance of what's permitted, what's not permitted? Just because it's on the books, what the law is doesn't mean he's going to uphold the law according to the way it should be. There are a lot of technicalities people can get away with also.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
During the time, say between 250 BCE and 250 of the Common Era, during that Talmudic.
I hate when you do this with dates. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, okay, let me forget the dates. During the time that the Talmudim, they were all being Talmudim. That's not the right word. Both Talmuds were actually being constructed and written.
Right. Right.
What kind of persecution were the Jews going through? I could see how intense persecution from this goy, from all these Gentiles of the world are constantly trying to kill the Jews and run them off. I could very well see why they would be so against them.
Well, what happened?
You know what I mean?
This was going on during the time of the Second Temple, right? Second Temple, they had to write it down,
right,
and gather everything together because the temple was about to be destroyed by the Romans. The Romans, the Greeks aren't any better. Actually, my history class this week actually going to speak about the decadence of the Greeks. The Greeks were pretty sadistic people. I mean, Romans not much different. The Greeks, hid their stuff through culture and education and architecture and all these things. They were pretty sadistic mothers. I mean, a lot of things that they did were absolutely horrific. I mean, the Romans were notorious, right? The Romans were absolutely, notorious for being that kind. So, the non-Jews during that time, again, you're not living in Victorian England. So you're talking about, you're talking about people, they were actually more well-versed in Torah than most people are today. They were just closer to it. But, as individuals go, I'll give actually one example. The Talmud says about Achashverosh coming close to the poor, one of my favorite holidays. But, it says by Achashverosh that all the other people of the nation, the different substates of, Persia at the time were saying, my wife is the most beautiful, and my wife's the most beautiful, and Achashverosh was plastered, and he said, oh, my wife's, so beautiful, and they said, bring her out without, just with her crown on, right? But one of the comments he made, right, before all this is that he said, this is the vessel that I use. That's what he said about his wife. He says, this is what the Talmud says. This is the vessel that I use. What does that sound like? Sounds like a pig.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So somebody who's got no morals, and no standards, right? Besides the persecution and everything else, is this someone you want to live up to?
Mm-mm.
Is this
Right.
someone you want to hang out with? Okay, it might be a strong statement to say, yeah, they all should be dead, but keep in mind all the terrible things they brought to the world.
Mm-hmm.
The people of Amalek, tremendously notorious, brought doubt to the world. They pillaged and killed people. I mean, again, I'm not saying, every single person, but you have to understand in the context where they were, the people that they were, living amongst, why does God tell them, just as a short side point, why does God tell them, one of the first things they have to do is get rid of the seven nations when they come into the land, because of all the disgusting things they've
Mm-hmm.
done in
Right.
the land to
Right.
pollute the land, right? They're not living in Victorian England. They're pretty bad. Murder, immorality, idolatry. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they get the big three. So you're hanging around with these people. You see these people, they're part of your country. I mean, Rome was, Greece was. I mean, these people were notorious, notorious for being just, bad people in general, whether they're sadistic, whether they're immoral, doing other things. I mean, there's a whole history, the whole history of these people. So, yeah, that might look like a bad statement. Read what went on in the Roman Empire. Read what went on in Greece history. We're not living in Victorian England. These people, as you said, I didn't say it, but I've said it many times. These people are scum of the earth.
Right.
They're
Right.
absolutely scum of the earth. Doesn't matter all the literature and the Renaissance and the roads and the aqueducts, as they say, right? And all the and all the architecture. These people were scum of the earth. They might have been more knowledgeable, but they're more knowledgeable scum of the earth. So, why shouldn't they be put out of our misery? They're not doing anything for the world, not certainly doing anything for us. We're just going to learn bad things from them. No question about that.
Okay. There's there's.
You got any other questions?
Yeah, I do, but I think we should probably leave some of these topics to text only, just for the sake of some things seem to be more sensitive than others. But as you can see so far, I mean, as I can see so far, at least most of these things, just within just a matter of a few minutes of listening to the explanation and the context of them, all of a sudden they make sense now. Even before the show today, some of these I haven't heard of, and then I was thinking, wow, that is pretty that is pretty bad. And then as you're explaining them, I'm like, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense now. And
I
the
mean,
thing
it's the
is,
same thing when you go through, Tanakh and you see, like, people, like these Freemasons, like we did a show on that, where,
right?
these angels have free will, and you look at the text and the context, they're like, I had to be drunk, plastered, and who knows what, to come up with such an explanation. But that's not what the text says, right? It's not even hinted. It's not even hinted over there. Remember those short little fat kids, right? Anyway, it's not even hinted. It's not even hinted
That's
over
funny.
there. And they pick the most hardest, the most difficult, text to go through. And says, no, it really means this, but it can't mean that because of the context. So, we love questions. We're not calling out that these are bad questions. Certainly by far, these things have to be discussed because people miss the boat on
For sure.
on exactly what's going on. And they say, oh, but they say this and they say that and they say the other thing, and look how bad it is. And when you look at what's behind it, you may not 100% like the explanation, right? But at the same time, it answers what's going on in context. So before a person opens up their mouth and say, oh, it's this, that, and the other thing, see what's going on. I mean, one of my favorite things. Someone brought up something, and he said, oh, it must be talking about these angels and this and that, and the whole previous chapter was talking about, the evil Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, right? So it was just a continuation going through that. I said, no, it's this, and and if you read it backwards, and you play the song backwards, it says Paul is dead, right? You go, Nebuchadnezzar is dead. You go
Hmm.
back, Paul is dead. Anyway, you go through this whole thing, and it's all in context, talking about the same person,
Hmm.
because everything's in context. And if it's not in context, yeah, then you can make up whatever you want.
Right. It's interesting. This is kind of one of the many reasons why I think it's not, even in my own opinion, why it's not wise for a non-Jew to try to study the Torah on their own, because number one, you're going to get it from the wrong sources to begin with, but number two, it's just it doesn't really apply to you. Really, it only applies to the Jewish people. But it's so easy to take a simple sentence or something out of misunderstand the sentence, or take the directive of the sentence and actually misunderstand it. I mean, I was just thinking, like, for me, like, I've got a spot here on my property, for example, where I have a burn pit, right? And the burn pit originally was on the ground. When we had really small scraps, I would just put a fire, and I would burn up whatever leftover wood I've got. And there's been a couple times where I just could not. It was like rainy, and I needed to burn this stuff. And so I was like, I took a little half a cup of gasoline. Yeah, I told you I'm redneck. Half a cup of gasoline and poured it on top of the wood, and lit it, and it worked fine. A couple times I've used some used paint thinner to kind of get the fire going whenever it's raining outside. You got to have So let's say somebody overheard me say talk on the phone to my son, and he's like, "Well, what do I do with this paint thinner?" If I say just dump it out on the ground, right? He knows exactly what I mean. He knows don't throw it out in the front yard. Right. He knows walk over to that burn pit where all these chemicals have always been and put it right there. He knows that. I don't have to explain that. So if all I said was just take that nasty stuff and pour it on the ground, and somebody heard that, they'd be calling, the SPCA. I'm just kidding. All these different companies of biohazard chemicals and all this other stuff. And I'm like, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean throw it out in the neighbor's yard or throw it out in the street.
One thing you mentioned was actually interesting about non-Jews learning Talmud. There's a craze in Korea that they know that, some reason, however they figured this out, that Talmud, that the Jews seem to be very smart. Right, and they've won all these different awards and invented all these different things. It must be because they learned Talmud, so they translated the Talmud into Korean. So they actually started learning Talmud because they figured it's going to make them smarter. But again, if you don't have a proper teacher, then I guess it's Greek to me, or Chinese, or or Korean. But 100% any of these things, a person, there's only so much you can get. Certainly in the vernacular in English, no question, but it's definitely worthwhile, to have someone who knows what they're doing to teach you, because, otherwise you're just, walking around in the dark and you say, wow, we're learning about, sacrifices, how cruel and medieval. Do you understand what a sacrifice is? When the temple comes back and it's to draw close to God and all this, I mean, it's a whole different thing.
All right, well, let's take this caller. This will be a last topic of the day, called Just in Time. Welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hey, William, it's Jason.
Hey,
how are you?
Mr. Green Acres Pest Control. How are you doing, brother?
I'm all right. I have a question about, I don't know if it's something that I think that this is the perfect show for it.
Okay.
My wife was looking into hypnotherapy birthing. And I want to know, it's like meditation and stuff like that. And I just wanted to know what Judaism, as far as hypnotism, what the Jewish law teaches.
Okay, clearly you just tuned in, didn't you?
Yeah, I just got on. I didn't realize you guys were live. Did I miss something?
Yeah. Actually, this is we're talking about like issues. You missed the whole show, buddy. Oh,
is that
man.
What it was about?
No, that's the whole point. That's why I'm laughing. It's like you must have just tuned in, because we're like on a totally different topic.
We had 20 topics. That was number 25.
Oh man, I'll tell you what. Just because you're such a good friend of mine, and you help us out so much here in the studio, I'll let Rabbi take a couple minutes for you on that.
Okay.
All right, brother.
All right, sorry, guys.
If I was on caffeine, I would have killed you a long time ago.
That's funny. All right, Jason. Thank you, brother. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye.
There is. I mean, I'm not, very much into meditation. There is, what to be said for Jewish meditation. There's a book written by Rabbi Coffman on Jewish meditation. Whatever is the controversy about, there is a thing about, some people, hypnosis is a good thing to see what, may possibly gone on. There was a book, I think we spoke about this, called Many Masters, Many Lies by Brian Weiss, about going deep into a person's psyche. I don't think you're talking about that per se, right? And they spoke about different experiences that they had in a previous life, which according to Kabbalah that can happen. But in any case, something like that, meditation is permissible. Obviously, it has to be, done, channeled, in the right way. I think a good start would be to, look at that book by Rabbi Coffman on Jewish meditation. That probably answer up a lot of that.
Very good, very good. And tell us real quickly again, on a different note, the new project you've started. It's kind of exciting. I'm actually thinking about getting on board myself, just because there's.
You thought about it 2 months ago. I'm still waiting.
Just because I still can't. I want to see how the next 10 episodes play out first.
10 episodes. I've only done 45. You got to see. All right.
I'm waiting until we can get like 40 viewers. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Do we get the 40? Yeah. I'll click my heels 3 times. I won't be in Toto anymore. Anyway, or Kansas anymore, Toto. So,
right.
Anyway, we started a new website, that subscription website, only $20 a month, and started with. I'm gonna put a lot of videos and stuff up there that's gonna consolidate it really in one area, and going through a lot of things in Jewish philosophy, going through the book of the Ways of the Righteous, Jewish history, starting from the Second Temple period. We're gonna have other things in philosophy there. Also gonna have some group discussions. I'm gonna work that out somehow in my unbusy schedule, and so that we're starting. That's already up and running. So anyone who wants to take a look at it, find me on Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. I can send you a walkthrough of what the website looks like, and then you can see what is what's out there. We're gonna time permitting, we're gonna put a lot of different interesting stuff up there. I see this Jewish history thing is it's taking me a little bit longer, but it's funny because you mentioned about non-Jews and wanting all of them dead. I just went through this whole thing about Greece and what and how cultured they were and how disgusting they were at the same time. That's actually, hopefully, I'm gonna do that tomorrow and put it up there. So that's gonna continue through present day. It's gonna have a long wingspan on that. So
now, one of the
anyone interested to get. Anyone, you can contact me on that. One
of the interesting things that I thought was neat about what you're doing is that you're going to be available to all the subscribers like on a regular basis. If they got questions, they can contact you like directly and all these other things. And I'll tell you, the reason why I find appreciation in that is because like with my software that I used to record with, it's really complicated software, and I actually paid them a subscription for the year, which is $300 for the year, just so that I could call them and talk to somebody when I had problems, because the way you typically deal with issues is you basically send them an email and type out a full 12-page essay on what happened, and they'll write you a 12-page essay back on how to fix it. I don't have that kind of time on my hands. When I need an answer, I needed an answer, like a simple answer, and I needed it like quickly. And so for me, it was valuable, and I liked having that. So I think that's kind of a neat benefit to what you're doing as well. I don't know how long you'll be able to keep that up if you get more and more subscribers. You got to have 3 or 4 of yourself to do that, but it's still. I
don't know. I'm good at cloning, so as long as the caffeine works, I'll just give it over to my evil twin like you do. So so it'll be it'll be good. But yeah. I do try and make myself definitely, available. Things are getting a little more hectic now with this wedding coming up, but still find myself around, and
good.
People can somehow get a hold of me. So that is, that's why, I always love scaring people. Someone will send me an email and send it straight away, and they're like, "Wow, I didn't expect to get an email for like a month." I'm like, "Yeah,
right.
It's a scare tactic." So,
yeah.
So people have questions, whatever. Definitely have access. Like I said, I want to make it more of a sort of a, like a conducive group. I haven't quite, figured out the dynamics, yet exactly how to do it, but whatever, working on that, definitely working on that, working on that as well. And again, it's certainly invaluable having, someone
Absolutely.
can help, along in this process, wherever they're holding. Because one of the things that we are trying to figure out how to put up there is my course on Discover Your Biblical Path that we're including in. So anyone who comes out of Christianity or idolatry and either wants to decide to be a Noahide or convert, and there's 7 interviews up there, etc. So we're just working on getting that
Nice.
up as well. That's pretty invaluable for anyone, on this path and they want to make a decision, which someone said, how could you put that up? You're proselytizing. I said, I'm not proselytizing. I'm not convincing anyone. I'm just saying, here's information.
Just making yourself available. Yeah.
I'm just putting out the information so people can see the information. I said, I don't care. You can fall off a dry pier, walk off a long path. Who cares? I don't care what happens to you. I'm just giving the information. You can make whatever decision. You can make whatever decision you want, and take it from there. So working on getting that, a few snags, working on getting that, getting that up as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for tuning in, Rabbi. Thank you for your time. Y'all be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place. Not sure what the topic's going to be just yet. We might, depending on what kind of messages we get through this video, and flack or whatever, we may touch base.
Any bad flack you send to him.
Nah.
Right? All the good stuff you can send to me.
Yeah,
that's the way it works.
Yeah, you can reach me at don'tcontactme.com.
I am at gmail.com, right?
Yeah. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and click on the little notifications tab or button next to it to make sure you turn that on, so you'll be able to get all the alerts. And follow us on Facebook and et cetera, et cetera. Etc. Shavuot, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you guys on the other side. Take care.
I hope you guys come back. Hope we didn't take off too many people.
There you go.
Bye.
Later, guys. Peace.
זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, שאיפה